On a cold city street, a homeless teenage girl stumbles upon a lost wallet, one that belongs to a wealthy businessman. What she does next will change both of their lives forever. Cold and hungry, Maya walks the streets, unseen by the world around her. But when she spots a wallet on the ground, bursting with cash, her heart pounds. This could be her way out. No one would ever know. But then she sees the ID inside, a powerful businessman's name staring back at her. One decision. That is all it takes to change a life. What Maya does next will lead her down a path of injustice, redemption, and a truth she never saw coming. If this story moved you, do not forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. How would you have handled Maya's choice? Subscribe for more powerful and emotional stories that touch the heart. The cold wind rushed through the city streets, biting at Maya's skin. She pulled her worn-out jacket tighter around herself, but it did little to keep her warm. Her shoes were falling apart, the soles barely holding together. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she was used to it. It had been another long day of searching for food, for shelter, for some sign that life would get better. She moved through the busy streets, careful to stay out of sight. People passed by in warm coats, carrying shopping bags, their faces full of purpose. None of them noticed her. That was the way it always was. She was invisible to them. On the other side of the street, Mr. Carter stepped out of a luxury car, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. He was a man of power, wealth, and influence, someone who had everything. But despite it all, his expression remained distant, almost cold. He moved quickly, too focused on his own world to notice when his wallet slipped from his pocket and landed on the sidewalk. Without realizing it, he walked away, leaving it behind. Maya, standing a few feet away, saw it fall. For a moment, she just stared. A wallet like that belonged to someone important, and inside it, there had to be money. Maya hesitated before picking up the wallet. It was heavy in her hands, the leather smooth and expensive. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped it open. Inside, there were crisp bills, more money than she had seen in months. Enough to buy food, enough to find shelter for a few nights. Maybe even enough to get a bus ticket out of this place, to start over somewhere new. She swallowed hard, her breath unsteady. It would be so easy to keep it. No one had seen her pick it up. No one would ever know. But then she noticed the ID tucked inside. Mr. Jonathan Carter. The name meant nothing to her, but the picture showed a man in a suit, someone who looked important. Probably a businessman. Probably someone who would not even notice the loss of a few bills. And yet, something inside her refused to take what did not belong to her. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, soft but firm. Do what is right, even when no one is watching. She squeezed the wallet tightly, her stomach twisting with the weight of her decision. It would not change her life, but keeping it would change who she was. She took a deep breath and made up her mind. Maya walked to the grand doors of the towering office building, her heart pounding. The warmth inside was overwhelming compared to the freezing streets. Everything was polished, marble floors, sleek glass walls, people in expensive suits walking with purpose. She fell out of place, every step echoing loudly. She approached the front desk, holding up the wallet with both hands. I need to return this. It belongs to Mr. Carter. The receptionist barely looked at her before frowning. Her eyes scanned Maya's worn-out clothes, the dirt on her hands. Where did you get that? I found it outside, Maya said, keeping her voice steady. Before she could say more, the woman pressed a button, and within seconds, 2 security guards appeared. One stepped forward, towering over Maya. You need to leave. But I am not here to cause trouble. Hand it over, the other guard demanded, reaching for the wallet. Maya's heart raced. They thought she was a thief. They did not even want to hear her out. Just as one of the guards moved to grab her arm, a deep voice cut through the air. What is going on here? The room fell silent. Maya turned, and there he was, Mr. Carter himself. His sharp eyes locked onto her, then the wallet in her hands. His expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then in a firm voice he asked, "Did you steal it?" And just like that, everything changed. Mr. Carter took the wallet from Maya's hands without a glance at her. He did not check the contents, did not say a word of gratitude. He simply turned away, slipping it into his pocket as if the whole thing was nothing more than an inconvenience. Maya stood there for a moment, waiting, maybe for a thank you, maybe for some kind of acknowledgement, but it never came. She exhaled slowly and turned to leave. Just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Wait!" She hesitated, but did not turn around. "Why did you bring it back?" His tone was unreadable, but there was something underneath it. Curiosity, maybe, or disbelief. Maya slowly turned to face him. Their eyes met, and she answered without hesitation, because it was the right thing to do. For the first time, something shifted in Mr. Carter's expression, a flicker of surprise. He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to understand the kind of person who would make that choice. Maya did not say anything else. She had given her answer. If he did not believe her, that was his problem. She turned back toward the door. As Maya walked away, Mr. Carter leaned against his desk, lost in thought. Her words echoed in his mind, because it was the right thing to do. A memory surfaced, one he had not thought about in years. He was young, no older than Maya, standing in the freezing rain outside an office building, his stomach empty, his hands trembling. He had lost everything. No family, no money, nowhere to go. A man had walked past him, just like all the others. But then he stopped. He turned back, and instead of looking at him with disgust or indifference, he asked a question. "Do you need help?" That moment had changed everything. Someone had given him a chance when no one else would. And now, all these years later, he had become the kind of man who ignored people like Maya. Guilt settled in his chest like a weight. He looked toward the door where she had disappeared. Then, almost against his own instincts, he pressed the intercom button. "Get that girl back in here." Moments later, Maya stood in front of him again, wary but curious. "I have a job for you," he said finally, "in the company cafeteria. If you are interested." Maya's eyes widened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. He was offering her a way out, not charity, a chance. The next morning, Maya walked into the cafeteria for her first day. The uniform felt strange on her, clean, pressed, smelling of fresh laundry. It had been a long time since she had worn something that was not tattered or worn out. She kept her head down and focused on her work, washing dishes, wiping tables, keeping to herself, but she could feel their eyes on her. The whispers. "Did you hear? She was homeless before this. I bet she stole something to get in here. How long do you think she will last?" She pretended not to hear. She had been ignored before, but this was worse. Being seen, but only as someone to be judged. Still, she pushed through. She worked hard. She kept her head up. Then, just when she started feeling like maybe she could belong here, someone walked up to her and said something that made her blood run cold. "I know who you really are." Maya turned sharply, her heart pounding. The girl in front of her smirked. "I remember you. I know what happened to your family." Maya felt her chest tighten. She had spent years trying to forget, trying to bury the pain, but now it was all coming back. Her past was not just a memory anymore. It had found her again. Maya froze at the words. The girl's smirk deepened. "You think no one remembers? Your father was a criminal." The cafeteria felt smaller, the walls closing in. Whispers spread through the room like wildfire. Maya clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had spent years trying to escape this shadow. Her father had been a good man, a hard-working man. But one day, everything fell apart. Accused of a crime he did not commit, he was sentenced to prison. Her mother had fought to prove his innocence, but the battle broke her. Grief swallowed her whole, and soon after, Maya lost her too. She had been alone ever since. In his office upstairs, Mr. Carter sat in silence, Maya's last name repeating in his head. It was familiar, too familiar. He pulled open an old employee database, his pulse quickening as he found a name he was looking for. Maya's father had once worked for him. And suddenly, memories came rushing back. Whispers of scandal, A rushed investigation. A man who had disappeared into the prison system without much of a fight. Something about it had never felt right. His fingers hovered over his keyboard. If his instincts were correct, this was not just a coincidence. This was something far bigger. Mr. Carter stayed up late, digging into old records, reviewing files that had been buried for years. And then, there it was, the proof. Maya's father had been framed. A high-ranking executive in his company had falsified evidence, covering up their own financial crimes by pinning it on an innocent man. It had been swept under the rug, forgotten by everyone except Maya. Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair, his chest tight. If he exposed this, it would mean taking down powerful people. It could mean the end of his career, his reputation, everything he had built. He ran a hand down his face. Meanwhile, Maya was reaching her own breaking point. The humiliation, the judgment, it was too much. She had tried to make this work, but she did not belong here. She never would. That night, she made a decision. Tomorrow would be her last day. She would quit. Maya stood at the back door of the cafeteria, gripping her apron one last time before taking it off. She had worked so hard to prove herself, but none of it had mattered. As she stepped outside, a voice stopped her. "Maya." She turned. Mr. Carter stood there, holding a file in his hands. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a weight, a truth. He was finally ready to speak. "You need to see this." She hesitated, but he handed her the file. As she flipped it open, her breath caught in her throat. Her father's case. Documents. Evidence. Proof. Tears stung her eyes as she looked up at him. What is this?" "The truth," he said. "Your father was framed, and I am going to prove it." An hour later, the boardroom was filled with executives, all watching as Mr. Carter laid out the evidence. The corruption, the lies, the injustice. Shock spread across the room. Some denied it, some tried to deflect, but the truth was undeniable. Then, the final revelation: Maya's father was alive, still in prison, but not for long. Because today, everything was about to change. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the final decision. Maya held her breath, her hands clenched together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. And then, the court finds that new evidence has come to light, proving the wrongful conviction of David Bennett. His sentence is hereby overturned. He is to be released immediately. A gasp rippled through the room. Maya's vision blurred with tears as she turned toward the doors just as they opened. And there he was, her father, older, thinner, but still the man she remembered. She barely had time to react before he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go again. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She felt whole. Across the room, Mr. Carter stood watching, his expression unreadable. But deep inside, he knew this was not just about clearing a man's name. It was about making things right. The corrupt executive who had framed Maya's father was stripped of his position and exposed to the world. Justice had finally caught up. And for the first time in a long time, Mr. Carter felt something he thought he had lost. Redemption. Days later, Maya stood outside Mr. Carter's office, uncertain why he had called her back. When she stepped inside, he was already waiting with a folder on his desk. "You have potential, Maya," he said, "and I want to make sure you get the chance you deserve." She frowned as he slid the folder toward her. Hesitantly, she opened it. Then her breath caught in her throat. A full scholarship. "For college," she whispered, barely able to believe what she was seeing. He nodded. "You were right about something that day. Doing the right thing matters, even when no one is watching." He exhaled, looking almost uncomfortable. "I lost sight of that for a long time. You reminded me." Maya felt her chest tighten. For so long, she had thought that life would always be unfair, that no matter how hard she tried, things would never change. But standing here, holding the key to her future, she realized something. Integrity was not just about one moment. It was about the choice to keep believing, even when everything seemed hopeless. And sometimes, that choice led to something greater than she ever imagined. Months later, Maya stood on a stage, looking out at a packed auditorium. The weight of the moment settled in, but this time she was not afraid. She took a deep breath, then began to speak. There was a time when I thought kindness did not matter, that no one cared about people like me. She paused, scanning the crowd. But I was wrong. She told her story, not just about the struggles, but about the small moments that changed everything. Finding a wallet, making a choice, being given a chance when she least expected it. And in the audience, Mr. Carter sat, listening. He had once believed that power and wealth were what defined a man, but Maya had shown him something else. Kindness had the power to change lives, even the ones that seemed untouchable. As Maya finished her speech, the audience rose in applause, and for the first time, she truly believed this was just the beginning.